Hey, look at that. We're live. Hey, y'all. Craig here from Subtle Energy Mechanics. Happy Saturday morning. Welcome to my page or welcome back if you've been here before. I'm going to try something. I have never gone live on here. I wanted to try. I've pulled out one of my favorite books and I just cracked it open to some random page in my favorite books. I listen to some stuff on audio, but with books, I like to outline stuff so I remember what's important to me and what moved me, and then I can go back and read them again. And so I think what I'll do is I'll share something that. So this book, it's called Impro, and I've got the description in the info if you like the sound of this. This book has been really helpful for me trying to figure out my own, history with, is it complex PTSD or neurodivergence, and without all the titles, like what the heck happened and where am I now, and how do I continue to bring life back to life, right? So that things are good as much as possible. So again, this book is called Improvisation and the Theater by Keith Johnstone. And for a couple thoughts at the beginning where we talk about, I talk about complex PTSD and stuff, the neurodivergent or autistic that didn't necessarily get something that their nervous system needed in the growing up phase. I'll read this little one-page story that gives kind of an example. And in this story, he doesn't even name her as autistic, but I'm asking you, like, what do you think? And do you resonate with this story and this experience? Yeah. Okay. And do you like my, like when I'm sitting here, I like to be able to see a long way. So out this window, I can see a long ways, but I'd be interested to hear what some of the way that you like to set up life in a way that just is calming and pulls you out into the space, out of your separate self and into your experience of the world. And this is that one there. That's a photo I took when I was in Hawaii. And so even looking at the camera here, I just get pulled into that experience of being in Hawaii. So let me read this for you here. So this is a first person account by the author, and he's talking about a girl. So this little one pager is called A Psychotic Girl. I once had a close rapport with a teenager who seemed, quote, mad when she was with other people, but relatively normal when she was with me. I treated her rather as I would a mask. And he, in parentheses, says, see mask, page 143, where because he's a theater performer or a theater director, he saw some really interesting transformation in people, in the people in his acting school when they would put on masks. Like it would just, they would almost turn into like wild animals and lose, and the actor was just gone. It just was, they just became the mask. So that's what they became the being that was kind of indicated by this mask. So this is what he's pointing out. He says, I treated her rather as I would a mask. That is to say, I was gentle and I didn't try to impose my reality on her. One thing that amazed me was her perceptiveness about other people. It was as if she was a body language expert. She described things about them which she read from their movements and postures that I later found to be true, although this was at the beginning of a summer school and none of us had ever met before. I'm remembering her now because of an interaction she had with a very gentle, motherly school teacher. I had to leave for a few minutes, so I gave the teenager my watch and said she could use it to see I was away only for a very short time, and that the school teacher would look after her. We were in a beautiful garden where the teenager had just seen God. And the teacher picked a flower and said, look at the pretty flower, Betty. Betty, filled with spiritual radiance, said, all the flowers are beautiful. "Ah," said the teacher, blocking her, "but this flower is especially beautiful." Betty rolled on the ground screaming, and it took a while to calm her. Nobody seemed to notice that she was screaming, "Can't you see? Can't you see?" Nobody seemed to notice that that's what she was screaming. In the gentlest possible way, the teacher had been very violent. She was insisting on categorizing and on selecting. Actually, it is crazy to insist that one flower is especially beautiful in a whole garden of flowers. But the teacher is allowed to do this, and it and is not perceived by sane people as violent. Grown-ups are expected to distort the perceptions of the child in this way. Since then, I've noticed such behavior constantly, but it took the mad girl to open my eyes to it. And I'm just in awe of this girl, and for a couple of reasons, a couple of things, just how she dealt with conflict. The conflict where the expectation is that the teacher is motherly, soft, and it feels good to be communicating with somebody who's motherly and soft and gentle. And then when they say something that is that the woman is not into, the teacher's not intending to be violent, but she is, and she doesn't even know it and doesn't even see it, and it's so violent to the girl's nervous system. And I'm going to spend a second putting this in that yogic kosha model, and I'm talking about the koshas, or the different frequencies of maybe consciousness of the world. And so we have this first kosha. Do I have a pen that you can see? Is that any better? Yeah, first kosha, and second and third, fourth, fifth. So the first one is the energy that just moves through the physical body in a slow motion. It moves with that, when you yawn, and right at the top of the yawn, it starts to come down and everything settles through the whole system. And when you're seeing a wave, that first kosha is what brings the wave down into safety, into the moment where everything's fine, everything's okay. That's that first kosha, and I'll just say that's safety. Now the second one is what brings that energy up, and that's emotion. Right? That's emotion. That's what get things going. That's what's moving me around right now. It's just energy in motion. It feels really good to move emotion. Third one is as we're designing ourselves, as maybe a kid is growing up and they start to think things, and they start to look around and see, I'm looking at a plant and a computer screen and white and can and pen. So this is where the brain starts to see something, draw lines around it, and put a name to it. Now, this is where we start to run into problems. Okay. That's the mental. And this is where we start to categorize things and compare. This is where, in this story, she's screaming not just at the teacher, but what the teacher is expressing about what's happening in the world in general, and the girl's expressing how much it actually hurts her body. And for me, this is that the birth of so much of the complex PTSD is that when we're subjected, not even consciously, to the violence of over categorizing and then comparing and imposing status. Status is what we need. We need status because I put this juice, Spindrift juice, has real juice flavor in it. I give this higher status than some of the other waters that I like. I like these glasses and I don't like these ones down in there. we need to be able to compare things, draw circles around them, because our specific human body that we're in has things that it likes and it doesn't like. So we need to be able to discern, compare, and move towards the things that we like, because it allows the body to feel safe, feel recognized, feel joyous. But when we overuse that status and then start to become exclusive, that's where the violence starts to come in. And this is where there's a line here. And this is where some of the schooling doesn't even recognize what happens up in here. And this up in here, what I'm going to say is mental. It's a higher complexity of the mental, but requires a higher level of complexity of the entire of the body, spinal cord specifically. And that's where this wave comes through that maybe you've seen in some of my other videos. The wave comes through. It's actually the mathematical complexity that takes us from defending and feeling low status, or recognizing that we're in a world that's purely status driven. You have to achieve this. You have to go to this college. You have to get this job. You have to get this thing. That's all the world. That's from here down. But there's no art down here. There's no heart down here. This is where heart starts to show up, which is actually the physical expression is this. It actually, there's a complexity of wave motion that moves up through the spine. That when it becomes coordinated at a certain level of complexity, which is right here and up, that actually the posture shifts and the heart starts to open. The head starts to get out of the way, because back down here, the head is leading. This is the intelligence. This puts understanding and knowledge and being able to communicate in a particular way, and write in a particular way, and create in a particular way, and judge each other in a particular way. That's very violent. If this is the only place that we're living. When we get up into here, we start to see the vision, and this is where the girl was coming from. She actually had a fifth kosha experience where she merged, and what Keith Johnstone in this book said, she saw God. She was in the garden. She was in this garden, and she just had an experience where she saw God, which is, from this point of view, this is going to happen up in here. This is the bliss or soul experience, and that's where she was lying in the dirt in the garden, looking at the perfection of everything as it was being built, just flooding her with beauty, and just flooding her with beauty. And then this teacher comes up and says, "But look at this one," and it's just like, and that's forcing her to go from here down. It's forcing her as in to be able to meet the teacher and to communicate with her, so the two of them can merge in an understanding. The teacher was expecting her to disconnect from this blissful soul level, to disconnect from her heart and force her body to contract down into these lower koshas. And the teacher didn't know what was going on, but the girl sure did. And that's this experience of being forced out of here by walking around with having to go through school, and where our culture is and what it values and what it doesn't value, rewards you for fitting in agreeing with only seeing the world in a violent sort of way. Kundalini King. Oh, cool. I've never done this. I can see there's people here. Yeah, it's just like that. So where does that leaves us is how, from a dualistic point of view, how could she have just stayed in that? There's just a division. Again, that's violence. It's a ripping apart. And that's a lot of that culture in the world that we're in. And for that girl to risk saying, like, she needs to uproot that connection, that connection with the connection with the tribe. She risks losing her place of inclusion in the culture. Hence, anybody on here feel isolated ever, especially when you're walking around other people, right? And how that is violent to the body. She loses safety. And then the emotion expresses that. And then her mental, the words, like, can't you see the beauty is everywhere? And I got to give it to her. Like, that girl was willing to scream for her truth. And how many of us have just are screamed out, are just like, okay, I'll go along with it. I'll go along with it. And just, hiding out. So anything else I want to say on that? This book, in addition to that, in addition to that one paragraph that I wrote, there's a reason why it's one of my favorite books. I've got a number of books on the physiology of this and what happens when we get stuck in, the fight, flight, freeze, the limbic brain. And if you look at what happened to that girl that was screaming, like, that violence will actually create that fight, flight, freeze state that then could turn into autoimmune conditions earlier or later on. Is going to affect what she can do in the world and her relationships, and whether or not she finds, how she finds her purpose and her people. And there's one other piece in this book where I talked about status. And anybody that's interested in this topic, oh, cool, you've got a book to order. Yeah. It's another status. He talked about, so I think that this artistic approach, especially for, people on the neurodivergent spectrum, like, how is really the only way to reconcile the violence when you're being forced down in here. How do you find your art? How do you find your art and looking at actually interacting with others as an artistic approach? And that was something that I found when I was, in school, hanging out with some of the folks in the theater departments, and not necessarily to become, the up on stage and be the star, but actually looking at the study of human interaction, so that how can you interact with humans so that you feel safe, so that your emotions can move freely through you, so that you're not feeling boxed into agreeing to communicate in a violent way that then shuts part of you down, which removes safety, which causes illness, which causes exhaustion, which screws up your sleep, which causes addiction, which causes you to go into this limbic fight, flight, freeze state that then will cause your own maybe narcissistic traits or borderline traits or bipolar traits then to become expressed. And when I say traits, I'm not saying that I'm or you are borderline personality disorder or whatever disorder, but what I would say is that taking this perfect little body, your perfect little body, and then trying to grow it up in this culture where violence is the thing. It's like taking a perfect little flower seed, putting it in the soil, and the soil is bad. The soil is toxic. The water is toxic. And that's what the culture in the schooling, especially for people who are maybe neurodivergent and feel everything, maybe empathic, maybe highly sensitive. You don't have necessarily a borderline flower seed. It didn't start that way. You put it in the soil, and the soil of the culture actually grew it up. So how the heck can you be in your teens or your 20s or 30s or on and figure out, like, oh my gosh, I have these traits that then come out and are negative or violent. They're lashing out. And so what do I do? How do I get myself feeling safe again? And so I can fuel my emotion and think clearly, plan in a direction, and actually maybe get my body feeling so safe and emotion and excited and passionate that the heart actually starts to open. And then I can radiate through my art and through my communication, and that may be verbal communication, but so many ways to communicate when you're up here that has nothing to do with words. Up in here, as the nervous system becomes more and more coordinated in a more complex way, you awaken from a separate subject into the more collective consciousness. And as there's an awake and playful artistic nervous system that's happening up in here, then that's where your purpose now starts to reveal itself. And purpose being, you're walking along, and in a culture like we're in, there's opportunities all over the place to drop a little bit of love, to drop a little bit of, like, if you are like that girl that's on the ground that sees perfection in all of the flowers, humans are the same. Humans are the same. So if your art, then part of your artistic expression becomes, how does this human thing, how can I interact with other human flowers? If the language part of me doesn't make a lot of sense, which would be maybe down in here. But if I can get my nervous system to be functioning up in here, and I can just in my interactions influence energetic winds and flow through the space, then the bodies that I'm interacting with here or throughout the day, their bodies might just spontaneously start to feel better. And that, what I learned was looking at interacting with humans, basically because humans started to interact with me and my body in such a way that, like, what is this that I'm feeling? And they're doing it from across the room. This is amazing, right? And that they're not just trying to fix something that's wrong in me, because from their point of view, I'm just another flower that's just as pretty as all of the rest. So they took away the status. I wasn't broken. Down in here looking, this is the medical world. This is looking at me as broken, or I have a diagnosis that needs to be fixed or treated. But from somebody up here looking at me or looking at you, there's no real diagnosis that needs to happen, but there may be somebody in need of a particular type of love or communication that not only includes the words, but how you are influencing empathic space. So they receive your communication from here down. Remember what I said up in here, this particular pattern, this frequency that's sent from here, the fourth kosha, spontaneously starts to open the hearts at everybody within frequency distance of you. So that's actually influencing the flowers to open up, no words required. This is making sense? And yes, with compassion. And really, this is with compassion for yourself, is that you, by studying the communication in a way that's like an artistic approach, like this is what I love about this. It's artistic approach doesn't mean there's no rules. It's still a craft with practicable postural, spatial timing is actually kind of the craft of, what's the word? Charisma. If you think about the people that you know that have some kind of charisma, how do we know that they have charisma? Like, what makes them different? Are they okay with silence? Are they okay with actually recognizing that they're going to say something and then they're giving space for the love thing that they're offering to the space to be received by you or by me? Or actually handing over to other equal hearts in the space. So on the one hand, they're playing this acting game, down here, they're having a job, they're making money, they're on screen, blah, 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 that stuff, which may have a status, right? I have a particular status, but they have this twinkle in their eye. It's like when you were a little kid and you look up an adult and adults are having this conversation. And then there was, one of those adults would like look down at you with like that little twinkle in your eye, to being like, yeah, this is BS. This whole adult thing, it's BS. We're talking to the muggles. But they look down at you as a kid and you get that like little twinkle and you felt like, oh yes, I'm included in this. Because kids are here, right? We're all born up in here. But then by being raised in our culture, this gets cut out and we're violently held down here. So how do we figure out how to awaken back up in here and not just stay here? This is another issue with people, is they want to just get to here. They want to just get to the bliss. But this may not happen if you're stuck with an autoimmune disease or like long COVID or of chronic fatigue syndrome or complex PTSD. Like, your nervous system could be so confused from being inundated by exhausting your system from living in what feels like a violent culture. This stuff's later. How do we get this safety thing first? And the safety thing, and here's the cool thing about these koshas, is that you can mix them. You can bring this 5th kosha bliss, like syrup, all the way down to the first one. You can integrate these two, and this is where the beauty and the art of taking some of these yoga concepts and mixing them with some of these. And when I'm saying acting, I'm not saying make believe. I'm saying how can acting being the study of how to be real, how to, if I recall properly or correctly, that acting is how do I act authentically? How do I arrive authentically in the moment under imaginary circumstances? Okay. How can I be authentic? How can you be authentic under imaginary circumstances? And that's acting. But if you look at every darn interaction that you have, isn't that what life is? Feels like you're walking around in imaginary circumstances, like a bunch of people are walking around playing make-believe, like they don't actually understand something. So how do we then bring this down here? It's a kind of a reverse game. We're not actually down here trying to get up here, but how do we become aware of ourselves up here? And posture is a part of it. Timing's a part of it. Our breathing is a part of it. And this can be a craft or an art where you can resonate a particular tone of the 4th kosha or the 5th kosha, and then bringing it down in a particular way where you're actually interacting with another being, whether it's human, cat, dog, horse. I've worked with all of these different, sea lion one time, a couple times actually. And when this is where the fun is, where you start to integrate some of these higher koshas down into the lower ones, and then you see their body respond, because their body These are all vibrations in the body and their posture when you learn how to read the body, just like he mentioned in this book, that this girl somehow is able to read body language through the movement, the timing, the space, because the posture is the outer expression of the inner experience. Something that one of my teachers said to me, and I was like, oh, that's good. I don't know exactly what that means. It feels kind of vulnerable, but it sounds like there's some truth there. The posture is the outer expression of the inner experience. And you can watch other people feel how you feel as other people are talking, but you recognize that that's actually true for yourself too throughout the day. So I recommend that book. And I think that's all I have for today. Happy Saturday, y'all. Thanks for the comments. And cool. This is fun. I'll do a live again. And thanks for showing up.